This video is kindly sponsored by MPB. This photo was just taken with the OM-1 and a 60mm macro lens, a setup that I will be trying out for a couple of days, in addition to a 30mm macro lens. This is not a gear review, more of a documentation of my experience with a setup that I might consider for my future macro photography. So I'm just gonna crack on with taking photos with it. My aim here is to simply get as much use from it as possible, to become comfortable with the camera and take images as I would with my own macro setup that reflects my style and subject matter, which will probably involve a fair amount of mushrooms. I did spend some time at home going through the menu system and setting the camera up to my liking, watching a few videos so I could work out how to use particular functions such as focus bracketing to maximize my on-location photography. Now, because we have IBIS in this little body, I'm going to work without a tripod and try and get some handheld stacks. And I'm nervous about this because I cannot do that on my 850. I have terrible shaky hands and the 850 doesn't have IBIS. But if a stack doesn't work because I have movement and it won't merge together, I will still have a few shots, some single frames that I can use instead. Not that needing a tripod is something that bothers me, as it may other photographers who dislike the process of having to set one up versus point, shoot, and then get on with it. I do like how a tripod slows me down when I use one. I'm usually in no rush and I love spending time sitting or standing around, relaxing in the sounds of nature and being surrounded by absolute beauty. Seeing as the sunlight wasn't shining upon this little brown fungus, making it seem quite dull and dark, I decided to use two LED lights just to shine some light that then gives us all this texture and detail and makes it really stand out. Being able to get the camera into really awkward positions and angles handheld is kind of freeing. There are times where I will frame up an idea handheld and I may need a bit of stability, so I pop myself on a tripod and it takes me a bit of time to be able to get that exact composition, that exact position and angle in order to take the image. But when I am set up, I'm going to be a bit more thoughtful about it because I'm taking that extra time to get it right, and therefore I know that I'm going to come away with an image that I'm really confident with. When you work handheld, or at least in my experience, it's very easy to sort of go snap, 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 and it feels slightly less intentional. To me, I would prefer to come home with two images that I know were right, rather than 100 images that I now have to go through and find out which is the best one. It really does seem quite backwards when you think about it in terms of a photographer trying to take as few photos as possible. I love these pale, tiny funguses. They're very ethereal and dreamlike, especially with some light shining on them, and they have so much character to me. I opted for a low angle so that you could see some of the gill detail, but also to make them feel mighty and tall. I like to get some of the light in the background coming through the trees by using a wider aperture as well, and an LED light helps just to illuminate the subject. This image was taken with a cooler white balance to give the impression of twilight alongside backlighting. The background just seems to dance like a nighttime disco, and I think this is one of my favourite images so far, alongside this peachy mushroom catching the sun late afternoon. I decided to also pick up a 30mm lens as well, a slightly wider perspective, because I think when you do macro photography, you tend to get into that mindset of I must get as close as possible, which makes sense because you're photographing tiny things. But in going wider, you can bring in a sense of location to your subject. So here we've got this mushroom, and if I go horizontal and slightly wider, in the background we just get that hint of forest and those forest greens. What I also really like about this composition here is that we've got lines in the forest floor, we've got lines in the cap of the mushroom and in the tree root, all going down in the same direction to the bottom left there. Now, as much as I love this is a nice little image, I really do love to get as close as possible, and the reason for that is that you just get a completely different perspective that you don't usually see when you're just walking around the forest. And in getting really close up, you have the ability to take some really abstract shots as well. Your gear should be the tool that expands your creativity. And I have noticed that with something smaller and lighter to carry around that gives me a bit more confidence being handheld, I'm trying things out more and giving into that curiosity more often. Apart from having to remember where the odd button is, this camera is so comfortable to have in my hand to use. Now, this is not me saying that I don't think my D850 or my D750 is suitable for macro photography, nor am I saying that I don't like to use them for macro photography. I think really this is just highlighting my laziness to get my camera out often, or the fact that subconsciously I'm aware that my setup is bigger, bulkier and heavier, and so I don't get it out as often as maybe I'd like to. I adore this little scene here. We've got some early autumnal colours coming through in the leaves around our subject. Our subject has so much texture and detail, the way the gills and the cap is curling. And then right in the back, we've still got some summer greens coming through. So I think I'm going to try this in portrait and a horizontal crop. And it's just so easy for me to just do both, swap from one to the other, because this camera focus brackets so quickly. I really love the wider angle with these images, and I didn't think I would, but I love that I can also capture some early autumn colour in the background. These images are now contending for the top spot of my favourite so far, but we do still have some photography to do. As you can see, some really low cloud decided to roll in, and it did start to rain, so I decided to look for an area that was a little more sheltered. Before we move on to the next chapter of our OM-1 journey, and while it absolutely tips it down, I just want to thank MPB for sponsoring today's video. MPB is an online platform where you can buy, sell and trade in used video and photo kit like this OM-1 and these lenses. For those of you who are dubious about buying used kit for the first time, I totally understand. Before I used MPB and I bought from other places, I worried so much that gear would arrive in the worst condition and I would be out of pocket. But that is not the case with MPB, and they are now my go-to whenever I need to add something to my camera bag. Their service is easy, reliable, and affordable. And what I love about when you send something into MPB is that a team of professionals will check it, test it, approve it, and photograph it, so that what you see on the website is exactly what you will hold in your hand when you buy. So you have a condition rating, and there are photos that you can zoom right into, so you can have a really good look at the gear that it is that you want to buy. So I'll leave the link to MPB down in the description box if you'd like to go browse some gear, or if you'd like to recommend a particular setup for my macro photography. And thanks once again to MPB for sponsoring today's video. I'm not going to compare the OM-1 to my own photography setup because they are two different things. It would be like comparing apples to oranges with full frame and micro four thirds, and both have their pros and cons to using them. But I am curious to know that if I go back to using my D850 for a little bit, to see if there's anything I notice or miss after having used the OM-1 for a few days. The first thing I did notice was the moment I set up my tripod, I switched into a relaxed meditative mode where I was happy to take my photo in my own time and enjoy my surroundings while I was there. I think this is what I love about a slower approach. Everything in my photographic process becomes very deliberate and thoughtful, from setting up to framing and making micro adjustments to the scene. But also the forest just gives me so much energy, and I love spending time in it. I think seeing as I've taken the time to set up a tripod, I then just go into this mindset of, well, I may as well just take my time with the rest of the technical aspects of taking this image, as long as I'm not in a need to rush because of my subject is moving or the light is changing. And I think this slower approach does benefit my photography in many, many ways, and I'm not giving it up, but I do think the occasional faster shooting could also benefit me. Because that is where you allow emotion and instinct to think for you. It's more reactive, and it could be a way, especially when you're in a bit of a motivational rut, to allow creativity to flow more. But also, if you're not out there, then you're not going to get the shot. And if I sit here for an hour, there could be a moment that I'm missing right over there. I'm not sure what I expected when I picked up the OM-1. I knew I'd noticed ergonomic differences and think about settings and image quality, but I'm both pleased and surprised that it has shone a light on a part of my photographic process and journey that was being kept in the dark. So I'm going to try and bring that balance into my photography, where I go from deliberate, logical reflection to emotional, instinctive art, to get a blend of both. It's funny because balance is something that I've been seeking in my general life as well, and that makes sense because the experiences that you have and whatever's going on up here does affect your art. It's all tied in together, it's mishmatched. The more I try to say it, the worse it sounds. Mixmatched. No, it's not mishmashed. I have enjoyed using this camera a lot, and should I decide in the future to introduce another camera for my close-up and macro photography, this is a definite possibility. In fact, I'm really going to miss that ibis. So this is the last image in this video with the OM-1, and it's now time to dust off the moss and get it packed up and sent back to MPB, sadly. But I'll be back again very soon, seeing as the autumn colours are just about perfect for some woodland photography. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.